James Madison is not the first face that comes to mind when you think about America's founding. He wasn't tall, he wasn't loud, he wasn't an impressive figure in a crowd. In fact, he was small, frail, and often so soft-spoken that people had to lean in just to hear him. But Madison had something more powerful than his presence. He had ideas. He was the man who obsessed over the problem of liberty, the student of history who studied why republics had risen and why they had fallen. While others grabbed glory on the battlefield or thundered in debate, Madison was quietly building something far more enduring, a framework for freedom that could actually survive. He didn't just want independence. He wanted a republic strong enough to protect it and wise enough to balance liberty with order. His weapon wasn't the sword, but it was the pen. And with that, he became the architect of a new nation. That's why history remembers him as the founder of the Constitution, because while revolutionaries dreamed, James Madison designed. Welcome to our republic.
When in the course of human events it becomes necessary for one people to dissolve the political band,
sailors and airmen of the Allied Expeditionary Force.
Well, I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the founding fathers. Not one small step for man.
Those three hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be.
we pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor.
James Madison was born in 1751 at Montpelier, the Madison's family's Virginia plantation. As the eldest son, he was expected to inherit the land and the responsibility that came with it. But Madison was different, prone to seizures, plagued by poor health, and by his own account, convinced he wouldn't live long enough. He lived much of his youth indoors with books as his closest companions. At the age of 18, he enrolled in the College of New Jersey, that we now call Princeton, where he studied under some of the most progressive minds of the age, diving deep into history, political philosophy, and law. He didn't just read Locke and Montesquieu and Hume. He dissected their arguments, weighing what might work in practice and what had failed before. He became fascinated with one problem above all. How can free people govern themselves without tearing their society apart? And that was the foundation of Madison's life work. And when the revolution broke out, Madison wasn't on the battlefield. His health made that impossible. Instead, he threw himself into politics in Virginia. And as a young legislator, he quickly stood out for his sharp mind and his refusal to compromise on principle. One of his proudest achievements was partnering with Thomas Jefferson to pass the Virginian Statute for Religious Freedoms. It declared that no man could be compelled to attend or support any church, and a radical departure from centuries of European tradition. This law just didn't change Virginia. It planted the seed for Americans' separation of church and state, an idea that would later be written into the Constitution and Bill of Rights. Now, what I mean by that, when I say that separation, because we've talked about this, I want to clarify because I know I have episodes on this, it means that the state cannot say you have to go to a certain church. That is all it means. Nothing more. And please go watch the episodes I have on separation of church and state because they are some of my favorites, right? Anyway, that's what I mean in that little statement right there, and the separation between those, right? It's that no man could be compelled to attend or no man could be compelled to attend or support any church, right? There has to be the freedom. That's where the First Amendment came from. But early on, Madison wasn't chasing popularity. He was chasing principles. By the 1870s, the revolution had been won, and the United States was on the verge of collapse. The Articles of Confederation left central government weak, broke, and unable to settle disputes between states. Trade faltered, soldiers went unpaid, revolutions broke out, and the dream of independence looked ready to fall apart. Madison refused to let the revolution die. And in 1787, he arrived at the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, not just with ideas, but with a plan, the Virginia Plan. He spent years combing through history of the republics and foundations, analyzing why the Athenians crumbled, why Rome fell, why confederacies splintered. And from that research, he drafted that framework for a stronger national government divided into three branches: executive, legislative, and judicial, each balancing the other. At the convention, Madison was tireless. He wasn't a showman, but he spoke often, argued with persistence, and took the most detailed notes we have of these debates. Without Madison, much of what we know about the creation of the Constitution would be lost. But more than that, without Madison's preparation, vision, and persistence, the Constitution itself would have never come together. When the delegates signed the finished document, it bore Madison's fingerprints at every turn. Now, the next battle was convincing the public to accept it. Many Americans feared the Constitution created a government too strong, too distant, too powerful. Madison knew that without public trust, the Constitution would just be paper. So he joined Alexander Hamilton and John Jay in writing the Federalist Papers, 85 essays defending the Constitution. Madison's contributions remain the most famous. Federalist number 10 argued that the large public could control factions, preventing any group from seizing power. Federalist number 51 explained why separating government into branches was essential. Ambition must be made to counteract ambition. These weren't just essays for the moment. They became enduring arguments for American democracy, studied and cited to this day. Madison just didn't fight for the Constitution. He explained it in a way that gave legitimacy for generations. Madison's closest ally was Thomas Jefferson. Where Jefferson dreamed in broad strokes, Madison worked in detail. Together they built the Democrat-Republican Party to oppose the Federalists, who they believed threatened liberty with too much centralization. Madison became Jefferson's Secretary of State, helping oversee the Louisiana Purchase and navigating foreign challenges as America was trying to find its place in a world dominated by European empires. He wasn't flashy, he was indispensable. The strategist behind Jefferson's vision. In 1808, Madison was elected the fourth president of the United States. His presidency was dominated by growing tensions with Britain. The British Navy harassed America's shipping and even kidnapped American sailors, forcing them into service. Madison resisted war as long as he could, but eventually the country had no choice. In 1812, America declared war. Now, the War of 1812 was brutal and uncertain. The United States was small, underprepared, and divided. And in 1914, British troops invaded Washington, D.C., burning the Capitol and the White House. And one of the war's most famous moments, First Lady Dolly Madison refused to abandon the president's house until she saved George Washington's portrait from flames. Madison, described as a calming crisis, rallied what forces he could. The war saw humiliating defeats, but also stunning victories. And like Andrew Jackson's triumph in New Orleans, and when the treaty was signed at the end of the war in 1815, America had survived its trial by fire. The revolution had proved independence was possible, and Madison's war proved the republic could endure. After 2 terms, Madison retired to Montpelier, but retirement didn't mean silence. He advised younger leaders, defended the Constitution against critics, and reflected on the nation he helped design. And though his health declined, his mind remained sharp. Madison outlived nearly all of his contemporaries, dying in 1836 as the last of the founding fathers. By then, the Constitution he had helped write had become the backbone of a growing republic. Now, James Madison, the father of the Constitution, he wasn't a warrior or showman, but a thinker who built with ideas what others fought to defend. He gave America not just independence, but endurance. His legacy is written not in stone, but in the living framework of government that still carries his vision centuries later. Our country, our republic. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. And remember, history isn't boring. It's the story of minds powerful enough to design freedom itself. I'll see you next time.